The price of ambition. The golden light of sunset filtered through the expansive windows of Dominic Blackwood's penthouse office, casting long shadows across the marble floor. He stood with his back to the door, phone pressed to his ear, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made him feared throughout the business world. "The Harrington deal closes tonight," he said. "Nothing else matters." Behind him, his assistant cleared her throat nervously. "Mr. Blackwood, it's your wife." The hospital called. "There are complications with the delivery." Dominic's hand tightened around the phone. Sophia, their child. For a moment, something flickered across his face, concern, perhaps even fear. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the mask of cold determination that had become his true face over the years. "Tell them I'll be there when I can," he said, returning to his call. The assistant hesitated. "Sir, Dr. Reed said it's critical. They're not sure if—" "I heard you!" Dominic snapped, not turning around. "The Harrington deal represents everything I've worked for. Everything Sophia and I have sacrificed for. She would understand." But even as he spoke the words, doubt crept in. Would she understand? The woman who had stood by him through every ruthless climb up the corporate ladder, who had loved him despite the coldness that had gradually replaced the warmth in his eyes. In the hospital across town, Sophia Winters Blackwood clutched the bed sheets as another contraction tore through her body. Sweat dampened her dark hair, and fear clouded her normally bright eyes. "Something's wrong," she gasped to Dr. Thomas Reed, who monitored her with growing concern. "Where's Dominic? Please, has anyone reached him?" The doctor exchanged glances with the nurse. "We're trying, Mrs. Blackwood, but right now we need to focus on you and the baby." Hours passed. The Harrington deal was signed with champagne toasts and handshakes. Dominic glanced at his watch only once, pushing away the nagging voice that told him he should be elsewhere. By the time he stepped into his car, his phone contained 7 missed calls from the hospital. "Take me to St. Mary's," he told his driver, finally allowing himself to acknowledge the pit in his stomach. When he arrived, the hospital corridor stretched before him like an accusation. Dr. Reed met him halfway, his face grim. "Where have you been?" the doctor demanded, professional courtesy giving way to raw anger. "We nearly lost her. Twice." Dominic felt the floor shift beneath him. "But she's alive, barely, the baby too." "No thanks to you." Reed's eyes were hard. "She hemorrhaged severely. We had to perform emergency surgery. She was asking for you until she lost consciousness." Dominic moved toward the room, but Reed blocked his path. "She doesn't want to see you." Those were her last words before the anesthesia took effect. "She's my wife," Dominic said coldly. "And you left her to die," Reed countered. "The board meeting you couldn't miss was more important, wasn't it?" Something broke in Dominic's expression then, the first crack in a facade built over decades. "I didn't think—" "No, you didn't." Reed's pager beeped. "She's crashing again. Make a choice, Blackwood. Stay in the waiting room or go back to your empire. But you've already lost what really mattered." As Reed rushed away, Dominic stood frozen in the sterile hallway. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the windows like tiny accusations. He had built his life on calculated risks, on sacrificing the present for future gain. But for the first time, he wondered if the price had finally become too high. Rebirth in darkness. The small cottage on the outskirts of Mapleton wasn't much. But to Sophia Winters, it represented something precious. A new beginning. 6 months had passed since that terrible night at St. Mary's Hospital. 6 months since she had made the decision to disappear from her old life completely. Thomas Reed had helped her, arranging for falsified records that declared Sophia Winters Blackwood deceased from complications during childbirth. In the eyes of the world, in the eyes of Dominic, she had died that night. Only her daughter had survived. "You're looking stronger," Thomas commented during one of his weekly visits, watching as Sophia gently rocked baby Melody in the rocking chair by the window. "Both of you." Sophia's smile was tired but genuine. "We're healing." She gazed down at her daughter's sleeping face, tracing a finger along the perfect curve of her cheek. "She's the reason I'm still here. The reason I'm fighting." Thomas settled into the worn armchair across from her. "Have you seen the news?" The Blackwood-Harrington merger went through. "It's all over the financial pages." A shadow passed over Sophia's face. So his sacrifice was worth it, then? Sophia, no, it's fine, she said quietly. I've made peace with it. The man I thought I married never existed. Dominic chose his empire over us. And now, he has exactly what he wanted. What Thomas didn't tell her was how Dominic had changed in the months following her death. How the ruthless business magnate had become even more ruthless, yet somehow hollowed out. How he had visited her grave, an empty grave, every Sunday without fail, bringing white lilies, her favorite. Across the city, in his glass and steel tower, Dominic Blackwood stared unseeing at the skyline that belonged to him. On his desk sat a small silver frame, the only personal item in the sterile office, containing a photograph of Sophia, laughing in the sunlight of what felt like another lifetime. Mr. Blackwood? His new assistant hovered in the doorway. The Castillo team is requesting another extension on their deadline. Dominic's expression hardened. Nathaniel Castillo, his oldest rival, the thorn in his side for over a decade. Denied. If they can't meet the terms, we proceed with the takeover. Yes, sir. The assistant hesitated. Also, your mother called. She'd like to discuss the Foundation's memorial event for Mrs. Blackwood. Tell her I'll handle it, Dominic said shortly. Eleanor Vance had been pushing for a charitable foundation in Sophia's name, a public relations move, nothing more. His mother had never approved of his marriage, had always considered Sophia beneath them. Now she sought to capitalize on her death. Later that evening, in the empty expanse of his penthouse, Dominic poured himself a third scotch and walked to the nursery he had never dismantled. The room remained perfectly decorated, untouched, waiting for a child who would never come home. He didn't allow the cleaning staff in here. This room was a shrine to his greatest failure. He didn't know that miles away, in a modest cottage, that child was learning to smile, reaching for her mother's face with tiny, perfect fingers. He didn't know that Sophia was slowly rebuilding herself, piece by shattered piece, becoming stronger than she had ever been when she stood in his shadow. As months turned to years, Sophia established herself in Mapleton under her maiden name. She started a small bookshop that became the heart of the community. Melody grew into a bright, curious 3-year-old with her mother's resilient spirit and warm eyes. And all the while, Dominic Blackwood built his empire higher, never suspecting that the greatest treasure he had lost wasn't actually lost at all, but growing beyond his reach with every passing day. The rival's refuge, Nathaniel Castillo, wasn't in the habit of visiting small-town bookshops. As the head of Castillo Enterprises, his natural habitat consisted of boardrooms and exclusive clubs where the powerful made their deals away from prying eyes. Yet here he was in Mapleton, browsing through shelves of well-loved classics while waiting for a meeting with a local land developer. "Can I help you find something?" The voice made him turn. A woman stood watching him with curious eyes. Dark hair pulled back in a simple knot. An understated elegance about her that seemed at odds with the rustic surroundings. "Just killing time," Nathaniel admitted, offering his most charming smile. "Though I'm starting to think getting stranded in Mapleton might be more interesting than I expected." The woman didn't react to his charm, a novelty that immediately intrigued him. "We close in 20 minutes, she said simply, then moved to help another customer. Nathaniel found himself returning to Winter's books the following day and the day after that. Each time, the owner, Sophia, he learned, maintained a polite distance. She was friendly but reserved, nothing like the women who typically orbited his world of wealth and influence. "You're not from around here," she observed on his 4th visit, finally engaging in conversation as she shelved new arrivals. "That obvious?" He leaned against a bookcase, watching her work. "I'm handling some business negotiations nearby." But I find myself extending my stay. Something flashed in her eyes. Wariness, perhaps. "Mapleton doesn't have much to offer someone like you." "Someone like me?" "Corporate. City." She gestured vaguely at his tailored suit. "This is a small town. People come here to escape, not to conquer." The assessment was surprisingly perceptive, and Nathaniel found himself intrigued rather than offended. "And which are you doing, Sophia? Escaping or conquering?" Before she could answer, the shop door burst open and a small whirlwind rushed in. "Mommy, look what Miss Porter helped me make!" A little girl, no more than 4 years old, held up a paper creation with pride. Sophia's entire demeanor transformed, softening, brightening as she knelt to examine her daughter's artwork. "It's beautiful, Melody," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind the child's ear. Nathaniel observed the interaction with unexpected emotion. He had built his life around competition and acquisition, particularly his decade-long rivalry with Dominic Blackwood, but family had never figured into his equation. Over the following weeks, Nathaniel found excuses to remain in Mapleton. The land development deal closed, but he discovered other investments that required his attention. In reality, he was drawn to the quiet bookshop and its guarded owner. Gradually, Sophia's walls began to lower. She accepted his invitation to coffee, then dinner. She allowed him to join her and Melody for a picnic in the town square. She revealed small pieces of herself, her love of poetry, her dreams for her daughter's future, her fierce independence. What she didn't reveal was her past. When Nathaniel asked, she offered only the vaguest outlines: a marriage that ended badly, a fresh start in Mapleton. "Everyone deserves a second chance," Nathaniel told her one evening as they walked along the riverbank, Melody running ahead to chase fireflies. "Even those of us who've made mistakes." He was thinking of his own past, the ruthless tactics he'd employed to build his company, the relationships sacrificed to ambition. Lately, watching Sophia with her daughter, he'd begun questioning the empire that had consumed his life. "Second chances come with conditions," Sophia replied, her voice distant. "Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried." He took her hand then, surprising them both. "Whatever you're running from, Sophia, you don't have to face it alone anymore." What neither of them knew was that 500 miles away, Dominic Blackwood was reviewing a proposal for expanding Blackwood Industries into smaller markets, including a quaint town called Mapleton that had recently caught the attention of his rival, Nathaniel Castillo. The collision course was set, invisible to them all. Ghosts of the past, the Mapleton Business Development Gala wasn't meant to be a grand affair by city standards, but for the small town, it represented opportunity and growth. Local shop owners mingled with potential investors in the restored historical ballroom, champagne flowing as freely as promises of prosperity. Sophia hadn't wanted to attend. Her bookshop was doing well enough without corporate partnerships, and crowds still made her anxious, a remnant of her former life where she'd been scrutinized at every turn. But Nathaniel had been persistent. "Your shop represents the heart of Mapleton's charm," he'd argued. "These investors need to see what they'd be supporting, not destroying." So she found herself in a simple blue dress, watching from the periphery as Nathaniel worked the room. In the 6 months since he'd entered her life, she'd seen a different side to the businessman, one who actually listened to the concerns of the community, who played hide-and-seek with Melody, who seemed to genuinely care about more than profit margins. "Ms. Winters, your bookshop is exactly the kind of establishment we want to preserve," a developer was saying, handing her a business card. "Perhaps we could discuss—" The words died as the ballroom doors opened, and a collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Sophia turned, curious about the interruption, and felt her world collapse. Dominic Blackwood stood in the entrance, impeccably dressed in black, his commanding presence drawing every eye in the room. Older, with touches of silver at his temples, but unmistakable. Time seemed to stop. Sophia's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the wooden floor. The sound cut through the murmurs, and Dominic's gaze snapped toward its source. Their eyes met across the room. Recognition, disbelief, color draining from his face as though he'd seen a ghost, which, in his mind, he had. "Sophia," he whispered, the name barely audible, yet somehow reaching her across the distance. She was moving before conscious thought took hold, slipping through the crowd toward the back exit. Panic clawed at her throat. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when she'd finally rebuilt her life. "Sophia." His voice, louder now, followed her. She pushed through the exit door into the cool night air, heart hammering against her ribs. A hand caught her arm. She turned, expecting Dominic, but found Nathaniel instead, concern etched on his features. "What's wrong?" he asked. You look like you've seen a ghost." A hollow laugh escaped her. "I am the ghost," she said, her voice shaking. To him, understanding dawned in Nathaniel's eyes. "Blackwood, you know him?" Before she could respond, the exit door swung open again. Dominic stood there, his composed facade cracked wide open, revealing raw emotion she had never seen in him before. "You're alive," he said, the words somewhere between accusation and prayer. "All this time," Nathaniel stepped between them, protective. "I believed the lady was leaving." Dominic barely spared him a glance. "This doesn't concern you, Castillo." "It absolutely concerns me," Nathaniel countered, his voice hard. Sophia placed a restraining hand on Nathaniel's arm. "It's all right," she said quietly. Then to Dominic, "5 years too late for this conversation, don't you think?" Dominic took a step forward, desperation evident in every line of his body. "I thought you died. I mourned you. I've visited your grave every week for 5 years. How convenient for your conscience," Sophia replied, finding strength in her anger. "Did you bring flowers to apologize for leaving me to die alone?" The color drained from Dominic's face. "Is that what you think happened?" "I know what happened. I was there, remember? You weren't." A flicker of something, guilt, perhaps realization, crossed his features. "The child?" he asked suddenly. "My mother said there was a daughter. That she died with you." Sophia's blood turned to ice. Melody, her secret. Her daughter who had never known her father. The man who had abandoned them both before she'd even drawn her first breath. "Your mother lied," she said finally, the words falling between them like stones. She always did. Understanding dawned in Dominic's eyes. "I have a daughter," he whispered. Behind them, Nathaniel watched the exchange with growing comprehension. "Sophia," he said quietly, "who is this man to you?" She turned to him, this man who had shown her kindness without demands, who had slowly earned her trust. "He's my past," she answered truthfully. "The one I never told you about." Dominic's gaze shifted between them, a dangerous comprehension dawning. "Castillo," he said, his voice turning cold. "Of course, my rival. Did you know who she was when you found her?" Nathaniel's expression hardened. "Unlike you, I don't use people as pawns." The accusation hung in the air between them, 3 people connected by hidden threads of loss, ambition, and unexpected second chances, standing at the precipice of truths too long buried. What remains in ashes? The cottage that had been Sophia's sanctuary now felt exposed, vulnerable. Morning light filtered through the curtains as she packed Melody's favorite toys into a small suitcase. They would stay with Thomas until she figured out what to do next. A knock at the door made her freeze. Too early for Thomas to pick them up. Too deliberate to be anyone but, "I know you're in there, Sophia," Dominic's voice. She closed her eyes briefly, steeling herself, then moved to the door. Melody was still asleep. Small mercies. She opened the door just enough to see him, blocking the entrance with her body. "What do you want?" He looked different in daylight, older, the lines around his eyes deeper than she remembered. "To talk. Just talk. We have nothing to say to each other. We have 5 years of silence to break," he countered. "And a daughter." The mention of Melody made Sophia's resolve harden. "You lost any right to her the night you chose a business deal over her birth. Over my life." Pain flashed across his face. Genuine pain, something she had never seen from him during their marriage. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "About the complications. About how serious it was. Would it have mattered?" she challenged. "Would you have chosen differently?" He didn't answer immediately, and in that hesitation, she found her answer. "That's what I thought," she said, moving to close the door. "Wait!" His hand pressed against the wood, not forcefully, but pleading. "Eleanor told me you were stable, that the delivery was routine. She said she would call if anything changed." Sophia stilled. "What?" "My mother. She was at the hospital before me. She told me you were fine, that I should close the deal." His voice cracked slightly. "I only learned the truth when I arrived later and Reed told me you had nearly died. Twice." The revelation landed like a physical blow. Eleanor Vance. the woman who had always seen Sophia as beneath her son, as an obstacle to his greatness, who had orchestrated their introduction, their courtship, always maintaining control from the shadows. Even if that's true, Sophia said finally, you chose to believe her. You chose to leave? Yes. The simple admission surprised her. I did. And I've lived with that choice every day since they told me you were gone. He looked past her, into the cottage. Now I learn that not only did you survive, but I have a child I've never known. A small voice from behind Sophia made them both freeze. Mommy, who's that? Melody stood in the hallway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, curious about the stranger at their door. Sophia's heart constricted painfully. This moment, this meeting, was never supposed to happen. Just someone Mommy used to know, Sophia said, forcing brightness into her voice. Go get dressed, sweetheart. Uncle Thomas will be here soon. Melody studied Dominic with unnerving intensity before disappearing back into her room. In that brief exchange, Sophia saw what Dominic must also see. The child had his eyes. She's beautiful, he said quietly. Before Sophia could respond, another car pulled into the driveway. Nathaniel emerged, his expression tightening when he saw Dominic. Quite the reunion, Dominic said coldly as Nathaniel approached. Did you know who she was when you found her, Castillo? A convenient way to strike at me? Nathaniel's jaw clenched. I didn't know until last night. Unlike you, I cared about Sophia for herself, not as an extension of my empire. Stop it, both of you, Sophia cut in. Neither of you gets to decide my life. She turned to Dominic. You lost that right years ago. Then to Nathaniel. And you never had it to begin with. The truth of her words silenced them both. I rebuilt myself from nothing, she continued. I created a life and a home for my daughter without either of you. I won't let you turn us into another battlefield for your rivalry. Something shifted in Dominic's expression, perhaps the first genuine recognition of her strength. What do you want, Sophia? He asked simply. The question caught her off guard. In their marriage, he had never asked what she wanted. He had decided, planned, arranged. I want peace, she answered finally. I want Melody to grow up without the shadow of your world, Dominic. Without the expectations and manipulations that nearly destroyed me. And me? Nathaniel asked quietly. Sophia looked between them, the man who had abandoned her and the man who had helped her heal. Neither was perfect. Neither could claim to own her heart completely. I need time, she said, away from both of you, to decide what's best for Melody and for me. In the silence that followed, a child's laughter drifted from inside the house, innocent, untouched by the complicated histories of the adults whose lives were entangled by her existence. She deserves to know her father, Dominic said eventually, even if that father was once unworthy of her. The admission, the acknowledgement of his failure was something the old Dominic would never have made. Perhaps, Sophia allowed, someday, but on my terms. As the morning light strengthened around them, three people stood at a crossroads of possibility. No perfect endings, no easy reconciliations, just the complicated truth that sometimes what rises from ashes isn't what was lost. But something entirely new for Sophia, watching the two men who represented her past and her potential future. The choice wasn't about them at all. It was about the self she had discovered in their absence, stronger, wiser, and finally, truly her own.